The first winter after I moved into the house felt wrong from the beginning. I had relocated to a quiet neighborhood outside a small mountain town, a place I barely knew outside of a few quick visits before signing the paperwork. During those visits, the streets seemed calm and almost unnaturally empty. People stayed indoors. Curtains remained closed. Even on moving day, while I hauled boxes from the truck for hours, not a single neighbor introduced themselves. At first, I appreciated it. I've always been the kind of person who keeps to themselves. But after that first week, the silence around the neighborhood started to feel less peaceful and more unsettling. The strange incident started 2 nights after I moved in. I was still unpacking, surrounded by towers of boxes and half-built furniture. Snow had been falling non-stop since noon, coating the entire street in thick white layers. By evening I was exhausted and fell asleep around 8:30. At some point during the night, I woke abruptly. The room was dark. The digital clock beside my bed read 2:13 a.m. That's when I heard it. Scrape. Thunk. Scrape. Thunk. At first I thought the sound was part of a dream, but it continued steadily outside. Curious, I got out of bed and walked to the window overlooking the driveway. A man was out there shoveling snow. He wore a dark winter coat with the hood pulled tightly over his head. Snowflakes drifted around him as he slowly dragged the shovel across the pavement. His movements looked stiff and mechanical, almost unnatural. I stood there watching for several minutes. The entire thing gave me an awful feeling. It wasn't just the fact that someone was outside my house at 2 in the morning. It was the way he moved, slow, repetitive, completely silent except for the scraping of metal on concrete. Eventually I decided to go downstairs and confront him. But the second I stepped outside, the driveway was empty. Half the snow had been cleared, yet the man was nowhere in sight. The street was completely silent. No footprints leading away. No nearby cars. No lights on in neighboring homes. Just the cold wind and the unfinished path carved through the snow. The next morning I convinced myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe it was some local trying to help new residents. Maybe he'd gotten embarrassed when he saw me coming outside. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about him was wrong. The following night, I stayed awake later while organizing the kitchen. Around 11, I finally went to bed. Then, once again, I woke up a little after 2. Scrape. Thunk. Scrape. Thunk. I rushed to the window. The same man was out there. This time I ran downstairs immediately, barely stopping to throw on my boots. I yanked open the front door. And again, he was gone. Not walking away. Not at the end of the driveway. Gone. Over the next several nights, the exact same thing happened. Every night around 2 in the morning, I'd wake to the sound of shoveling. Every night the man would appear in my driveway. And every time I tried to catch him, he vanished before I reached the door. By the 5th night, I had stopped trying to go outside. Instead, I watched from the upstairs window, feeling more disturbed each time I saw him. Something about the situation felt deeply wrong. Then came the night everything escalated. I woke up again to the familiar scraping noise, but this time it stopped suddenly before I reached the window. The silence hit instantly. I pulled the curtain aside. The driveway was completely cleared. No man in sight. I stared outside for several seconds, confused. There was no way he could have disappeared that quickly. A horrible feeling settled into my stomach. I hurried downstairs and opened the front door. The man was standing directly on my porch. So close I nearly stumbled backward. He gripped the shovel loosely in one hand. Up close, he looked even worse than I expected. Pale skin. Long wet hair hanging around his face. A tangled beard crusted with snow. His eyes looked exhausted and hollow, fixed directly on me without blinking. Neither of us spoke. For several seconds he simply stared. Finally I forced myself to ask what he wanted. His expression tightened slightly, almost irritated that I'd spoken at all. Without answering, he turned and walked down the porch steps. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching him disappear down the road into the darkness. I barely slept that night. The following day was strangely calm. No snowfall. No sounds outside. I spent most of the afternoon trying to convince myself the situation was over. That night, I woke again around 2. But there was no scraping sound. The silence was somehow worse. I lay there trying to fall asleep when I heard a soft thud downstairs. It was faint, but unmistakable. I got out of bed and slowly walked downstairs. The hallway was dark. As I reached the bottom step, I noticed something standing in the living room. A figure. Motionless. The man stood in the center of the room with his back facing me, still holding the shovel at his side. He wasn't moving. Wasn't speaking. Just standing there in complete darkness inside my house. I ran upstairs so fast I nearly fell. I locked myself in the bedroom and called 911 while trying to keep quiet enough not to let him know where I was. Police arrived within minutes. They found the rear door open. The man was gone. I gave them every detail I could remember, but nothing ever came from it. No suspect. No explanation. No neighbors recognized the description. One officer suggested the guy may have been mentally ill or sleepwalking because of the repetitive behavior. Maybe. But that explanation never sat right with me. Because somehow, every single night, he always knew the exact moment I left the upstairs window. And somehow, on the final night, he ended up inside my house before I even realized the door had been opened. I moved out before spring arrived. To this day, whenever snow falls late at night, I still wake up expecting to hear that slow scraping sound outside my window again.